panel today, Richard Cook. He's a former federal government analyst, and if you were at the plenary session this morning, you know he's a whistleblower for the Challenger disaster when he was working for NASA. They tried to cover up that disaster, and he was one of the whistleblowers leading to investigation of it. He's a leading scholar of monetary theory and economic reform, and he's the author of the book, Challenger Revealed, an Insider's Account of How the Reagan Administration Caused the Greatest Tragedy of the Space Age. Ricky?
Thank you, Tom. I need to be close to this and that, I suppose. So can I pull this back a little bit? Is this okay? Am I talking into the microphone? Okay, thanks. Also, I passed around my flyer. I've got a new book coming out. In fact, I just was talking to the publisher at lunchtime today about getting the blurb on my book into their current catalog. It's called We Hold These Truths, The Promise of Monetary Reform. It's being published by Tendril Press, which is a small trade publisher. They're hoping to get big. They're small now. In Denver, Colorado. This book we hope will be coming out this fall. They started the editing on it. And what you're going to hear today is in the book. I want to bridge the gap between what we're doing here today in the morning session, because what I'm going to go over here is the economics of empire. Everything that we've been hearing is very, very important because there's a small but growing worldwide monetary reform movement. And what you're hearing today from the speakers here, and I think you'll be hearing us throughout the conference and other sessions, is really, is really our explanation of what we heard about this morning. We heard some pretty awful things about the state of the world. And those of us in the monetary reform movement are convinced that much of what we have heard about is caused by an economic and a monetary system. By the same token, much of what we think needs to be done to correct that can be sought for and found in the economic and monetary system. And so that's what you're getting here from people who have studied this really their whole lives, and it's very, very important. And what I'm going to do, I wrote this long lecture I was going to read, but at lunch I wrote this instead, this chart. So I'm going to put the chart up, and it's going to contain the lecture in a picture. And so I hope that you'll be able to follow along with it. And I want to say that one of the things maybe I'll do between now and next year's conference, if I'm invited back, is to try to take the other presentations that you've heard today on monetary reform and show how they fit into this model, because I do believe they fit. You may say, well, you know, one speaker said one thing, one said another thing. But if you really study the different approaches people take, and everybody comes at this a little bit differently from their own interests, their own specialty, their own experiences, but I can assure you the monetary reform movement is really coming together. And the people that you hear, even though you're hearing different angles, are all really talking about the same thing. And it really comes down to going from the economics of empire to the economics of democracy. So that's where we're headed, and I think we're all heading there together. Now, what I'm going to do is give you a model, which is, some people call this the A plus B theorem, the A plus B model. But in reality, it goes to the gap between aggregate prices, which Ellen was pointing out, which is measured by the gross domestic product, and earned income, which is what people earn and take in and have available as purchasing power. So if we call, we're going to do, first of all, that doesn't work. This is not high tech. Try this one. All right, if we call this prices, and prices are the GDP, which is about, well, I'm going back to 06, $13 trillion. That's what the GDP is worth. So in order to pay for the GDP, money has to come into the system in the same quantity or value as the GDP measures. Now, the GDP does include things that maybe shouldn't necessarily be there. For example, the resource monopolies that Dr. Smith was talking about. You're going to find those in prices, but you're also going to find it in purchasing power because somebody is going to benefit from that. And so you have, down here at a lower level, you have income or purchasing power, which is a variable that is somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 trillion. So we'll call that purchasing power 10 trillion. And the purchasing power is primarily made up of what people have available to spend in a particular accounting cycle. So we'll call this accounting cycle 2006, since that's where these figures are from. And the available income or purchasing power is composed of three principal elements: wages, salaries, and dividends. That's what people have available to spend in the accounting cycle, and in 2006 it was about 10 trillion. That leaves what we call the gap. And in the A plus B theorem, all that says is this is A, this is B, and together they compose the entire GDP, the entire price system, but the difference between the two, or B, is the gap. That gap has to be filled, because if you can't fill that gap, people can't buy what's produced, and so the economy will go into a depression.